بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله على سيدنا ونبينا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد وآله الطيبين الطاهرين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين أجل الله تعالى فرجه الشريف. اللهم أخرجني من ظلمات الوهم وأكرمني بنور الفهم. اللهم افتح علينا أبواب رحمتك وانشر علينا خزائن علومك برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين. We have tawfiq to continue our study of Ma'arif al-Qur'an by the late Ayat Misbah rahmatullah alayh. As you remember, we talked about ikhtiyar, free will. Then last week we talked about some verses or hadith that may be taken as suggesting there is no ikhtiyar, everything is decided already about, determinism or jabr, etc. Today we want to study some other ways of thinking that jabr is true. It's not Quran or hadith references that can be quoted, misunderstood. Some other things. We start first with jabr falsafi, with philosophical determinism, a kind of philosophical approach. You remember in philosophy we had this rule, الشيء ما لم يجب لم يوجد. We said everything that exists, either it is واجب الوجود بالذات or ممكن الوجود بالذات. Yeah, because ممتنع الوجود بالذات, something which is impossible by itself, cannot exist. So whatever exists is either واجب الوجود بالذات or ممكن الوجود بالذات. واجب الوجود بالذات, okay, is necessary. So it's wajib and it has to exist. ممكن الوجود بالذات also, in order to become موجود, in order to exist, must become wajib, but بالغير. Yeah, it has to become necessary, but by the complete cause. So everything that exists either is wajib بالذات, Allah subhanahu, or wajib wujud بالغير. All mumkinat that exist, they are wajib wujud بالغير. So nothing exists unless it is wajib, unless it is necessary to exist. You remember many times I was referring to this equation, al-mahiyatu amkanat fahtajat fa'ujibat fawajabat fa'ujidat fawujidat. Mahiya is mumkin. Because it is mumkin, it is muhtaj. We had a discussion, mahiya illatu hajat al-mumkin. Why mumkin needs illa? We said illatu hajat al-mumkin is not hudus, it is imkan. Remember we talked about it. Because if we say illatu hajat al-mumkin is hudus, in addition to the problems that it has, it means that then those which are qadim don't need illah. But we say no, even if a qadim mumkin exists like mujarradat, they need illah because they are mumkin. So al-mayatu amkanat fahtajat fa'ujibat, it has to be necessitated by illat tamme fawajabat, so it becomes wajib. Fa'ujidat by illat tamme fawujidat. This is what we said, you should remember, and I was in a humorous sense, you might be asked about this in the night of qabr, barzakh. So everything ma lam yajib lam yujad. Now, some people have thought this conflicts with ikhtiyar. Either you have to allow exception to this philosophical rule. So, this philosophical rule has exceptions. And that is when it comes to af'al ikhtiyari. When it comes to voluntary actions, it doesn't apply. If you don't allow exception, then there is jabr. Our idea is that, first of all, philosophical rules, laws, they have no exception. These are not something that you can allow exception. If there's exception, it means you have not understood the rule properly. It has to be always universal, but what conditions, what details are there, you have to put them together, articulate them well, and it is always true whenever it's applied to a case. If it's not applicable, that's different. Asl illiyat has no exception. Ashya ma lam yajib lam yujad has no exception. The true and constructive answer is Ashya ma lam yajib lam yujad is true and it's universal without exceptions. But when wujub comes, when necessity or darura comes, when the whole illat tammah is available, the complete cause is there, everything that we need, muqtazi, adamul mane, shurut should be available, everything should be there so that illa is complete. When illa is complete, necessarily ma'lul comes. لا يجوز تخلف المعلول عن علته التامة. Yeah, it's impossible that illat tammah is there, ma'lul says I don't want to come. I don't want to exist. It's impossible. خب illat tammah for voluntary actions has free will of the agent as part of it. For many things, illat tammah doesn't have free will. For example, if you want to have fire, wood, oxygen, etc. are needed, you can have fire. The wood doesn't need to decide to be burnt or not. The fire doesn't need to decide to burn or not. No. But for af'al ikhtiyari, for our voluntary actions, our free will is part of illat tammah. So after we make decision and everything, because we make all the preparations, everything should be available, then the last thing is that you decide to do it or not. If you decide to do it, it becomes complete and it's done. So after ikhtiyar and completion of all things needed for illat tammah, it becomes daruri, and here you cannot stop it. Yes, here you cannot stop it, but we don't need this for ikhtiyar, because this means to undo. Ikhtiyar means that if everything comes together but you don't want, you don't do it. If you want, you do it. Not that if you want and everything is there, still it may happen or may not happen. No. That is not a requirement of ikhtiyar. That's impossible. Like, for example, we throw arrow, shoot the arrow towards a target. After you have sent this arrow, it's gone. Your job is done. You cannot say ikhtiyar means that it's up to me to shoot the arrow or not, and it's up to me when I shoot it to stop it, to undo it, to reverse it. No, who said these are requirements of ikhtiyar? When you do it, you do it. So, darura is there, but this darura is after ikhtiyar, not before ikhtiyar. Some people who didn't understand this, they thought this darura is problematic. Either they wanted to, make exceptions, or they said no, instead of zarura, what illat tamme does is just gives awlawiyya. Remember in Bidayatul Hikmah we had this idea. Some people were saying we don't accept ash-shay'u ma lam yajib lam yujad. We say illa just makes it more likely to happen. Qa'ila bi awlawiyyat. They were saying awlawiyya. But we said no. Even if it's 90%, 99% probable to happen, it doesn't happen. Because then there's always a question that when illat tamme was there, what made it happen? Because you said illat tamme is 99%, so there was 1% chance. You have to explain why that 1% didn't happen. As long as there is a question, lema, so we need explanation. Whether it is 1% or 99% likely to happen, explanation is naqis, is incomplete. So we rejected qawl bil ulawiyya, if you remember. So this is philosophical jabr or determinism, and we explained it. Of course, there can be some other also issues about jabr in philosophy, but right now the focus is on the main thing, which is zarura. Then there is what he calls shubhiyya jabr tabi'i, natural determinism, or you can say a kind of determinism which is based on natural sciences and natural factors. Some people have said that whatever we do is because of some interactions that take place in this nature and then finally in our body. Okay? It's not in your control. For example, to see. If your eyes are open, okay, and someone is passing by, or a bird is flying, or there is sunshine, if your eye is open, can you say I decide? Can you say I decide to see or not to see, or you will see it anyway? Yes, you can close your eyes, but if you open your eyes, you will see it anyway. Or for example, if you are in a cold room or hot room, you cannot say it's up to me to feel the heat or cold weather. You feel it anyway. This is affecting your sensors in your body, and you will feel it. Sometimes there are hormones inside us that may make us, for example, very nervous, stressful, active, hyperactive. Sometimes food, medicals, chemicals, medical prescriptions, medicine, chemicals, they kind of impact. Maybe there are things that if we take them, they make us very, happy. Something maybe make you very, sad. So there are things that affect our body, your food, your nutrition, exercise, not exercise, all these things. So this is one aspect of this. Another aspect is inheritance. They say you receive some genes from your parents and maybe for parents, and these genes also, without your choice, without your exercise of free will, have impact on you. So they try to suggest that in the same way that our body is influenced by environment and by our family background, our decisions are also affected. And they are not just saying that we are influenced, they say we are forced to act, forced to become like this. The answer is that this is an exaggeration. Yes, we accept the body, the hormones, genes, food, temperature, environment, all have some influence. But their influence is not irresistible for the most part. If someone is really not able to resist, again, for example, someone who is ill and then has to go for treatment, and if there is no treatment and has really no control, then morally and religiously may not be responsible if someone has no control at all. But most of people are not like that. We, based on these natural phenomena, may be inclined towards, for example, something. Some people maybe get angry more easily, not because of their tarbiyah only, but because of their body situation. For example, maybe when you become older, when, some hormones are there, maybe, for example, women at some times, maybe they become more easily upset, or they get more easily angry. But this is not something which cannot be controlled. This can always be controlled. For example, Allama Tabatabai, despite old age and despite suffering from illnesses for many years, even he had Parkinson, etc., but he was never getting angry. Maybe if someone else was in a situation even 50% easier than his situation, was getting easily angry, but he was not getting angry. In one of the lectures I told you, once a young person was riding bicycle, hit him, and he stood up and went to him and asked him how he was. Instead of getting angry at him and said, why you did this, etc., he went like a kind father to see whether this young boy is okay or not. How much control you have over your nafs? Because sometimes when we can plan, yes, we can plan in a nice way, but sometimes when you are triggered quickly, bad things easily come out. So it's possible to control. Unfortunately, sometimes also some misreading of psychology and psychoanalysis make people think that every person has a condition, this is fixed, you cannot do anything. The maximum you can do, for example, to take some tablets, and so all akhlaq and tarbiyah all are marginalized. It's just some tablets and some therapy, etc. Even not comprehensive therapy, just some very technical, without any emotion, without any spirit sometimes. We don't deny the physiochemical, biological aspect, but we are saying it's not just that. But the same with inheritance. Yes, inheritance has some role, definitely. But it's not decisive. Sometimes people of the same father and mother are different. It's not that because you have the same genes you have to be the same. Even I believe if you clone someone, the second person may not become like the first person. If the first is mu'min, this becomes mu'min. If the kafir, this becomes kafir. If the generous, this becomes generous. No. There can be tendency, but nothing is decisive. Again, this second person has to choose what want to do. Even the same person, you cannot always predict. You can say, yes, based on what he has done in the past, there's a chance that 80%, 90% in this situation he is going to do this. But it's not 100% guaranteed. That day he may decide to do something else. Maybe someone before that has talked to him and he decides to do something else. Maybe forgets. So there is no decisive or 100% clear route. Ayat Misbah also refers to the story of Prophet Yusuf ala nabina wa alayhi salam. It says the situation that Prophet Yusuf was put in. A young person, not married, is faced with a beautiful woman who is inviting him and encouraging or even forcing him. Beautiful palace, mirrors, etc., beautiful dress, everything. But was Yusuf alayhi salam forced to do bad thing? No. Despite all the things which were there to suggest, to push towards doing bad thing, he didn't do it. It's possible. Quran says, وَلَقَدْ هَمَّتْ بِهِ وَهَمَّ بِهَا. Zulaykha, Hammat means Hammat Zulaykha. Here refers to Zulaykha. Wanted Yusuf. Hamma Yusuf biha. Yusuf also was going to want Zulaykha. But lawla an ra'a burhana rabb. Had it not been that there is something, a burhan, a kind of light, a kind of knowledge, a kind of understanding, a kind of vision Allah gave to Yusuf, Yusuf also could go by pressure of the instincts, etc. But human beings can always act differently. If they listen to God, if they listen to the conscience that they have, they may resist against bad temptations. كَذَلِكَ لِلنَّصْرِفَ عَنْهُ السُّوءَ وَالْفَحْشَاءَ. So environment cannot force 100%. They can influence but not force. The next type of jabr is historical. Some people say, especially the recent centuries, some people talk about history having a kind of existence and a kind of esprit, and history has its own laws and forces its laws on societies. We don't deny that there are things about history. Inshallah, actually today I thought maybe it's good that we study history and society, inshallah, either based on Ayatollah Mutahhari's book or Ayatollah Misbah's book at one point, inshallah, and about especially philosophy of history. We accept that there are some laws, some sunan with respect to history, with respect to human society. But to say that history is something that exists by itself and has its own laws, and it forces its laws on people, and people, without having any choice, they have to go by these laws. No, we don't accept this. Even if we say that we can understand some patterns in history, for example, how civilization may go to the peak and then may go into declination, what are the things that can, demolish a civilization, etc. We can understand some patterns, but it's not that every civilization has to go that route. No, maybe a civilization learns how to protect itself, how to avoid decline. It's possible. So there is no jabr, especially for individuals. Even if a society is forced by suppose compromise, even if we accept that society has it receives a kind of force from history, but this doesn't apply to individuals. There have been always individuals in every society that they didn't agree with the norms of that society, or with the pressure of the history, etc. Sometimes they went to something from before or something about future. Either they were ahead of their time, or they were going backward, or if going back was going forward, because sometimes going backward means to go forward because the society has so much declined. So for example, the society is doing what people were doing few thousand years ago, a kind of jahiliyyah and uncivilized behavior, that when we say we want to go to our Islamic roots, still we are very much ahead, and certain values are not going to be affected by the passage of time. So to return to a tradition, to our roots, is different from irtija, which means to go backward. So there is no way to say that history exists as something independent and forces all the societies and all the individuals. They cannot resist. They're not free in every aspect. Even now, I am going to talk to you or not. It's force of history. No, it doesn't make sense. They're all they have some good observations, but the problem is they exaggerate. Yes, there is something about history. There is a role of inheritance. There is a role of food. There is a role of hormones. But don't exaggerate. Don't make it as decisive factor, or just the only thing that matters. Exaggeration is a problem. Otherwise, I believe all philosophers, all schools of thought, all of them, they have some good points. Because if it was 100% batil, no one goes after it. They see something good, they see some truth, more or less, some more, some less. But the problem is they exaggerate about what they have found and they deny everything else. This is the problem. Even Marxism has something good in it. Any school of thought is not 100% wrong, because if someone was 100% wrong, it was good, then we could just do the opposite and we had 100% of the truth. But it's not like this. It's just a matter of how much they have grasped from the truth. They grasp sometimes 5%, 10%, 15%, 20%, and then they deny other things. This is the problem. They exaggerate. Okay. The next thing is jabr ijtima'i. This previous one was jabr tarihi, historical determinism. This is social. This is what we learn from people that are more interested in social sciences. They say society has an independent existence. Society is as if it's a reality, it's a being, It has its own rules, its own laws, its own pressure, forces, and it dictates itself on the members of the society. Ayat Misbah says, to say that society philosophically exists is not acceptable. We have individuals, but we don't have something in addition to the individuals called society. When individuals live together, there are some interactions, and we call these individuals, those interactions, those relations, society. It's not that society is something separate. Plus, to say that society has a spirit, some say ruh jam'eh, like Dorkam, etc. Society has no existence and no spirit. It's just the individuals. Yes, this is very important. When individuals get together, you face new things that if they were separate, you would not see. Like, for example, a sea, an ocean, is not different from drops of water. Yeah, it's not that we have something separate that is ocean, a reality that is ocean. No. When these drops of water come together, we call it ocean. Ocean by itself is not something, independent. But these drops of water, when they are separate, they have limited, influence. But when they get together, becomes a sea, a lake, an ocean, then there are trillions of drops of water or more, then you can swim, you can have sheep, boats, lots of animals living there. These are things that you could not do in a drop of water. But this doesn't mean that ocean or sea are separate realities. We have water and we have sea. We have water and we have ocean. It's not like that. Therefore, society, like history, is not something separate. Although when people live together, norms, rules, interaction are different. For example, to predict, for example, when there is election, to predict what behavior people in a society are going to do is much more complicated than just adding behaviors of individuals. Because when we human beings live together and interact, our behavior is different from people separately behaving. When also you want to plan for economy, you have to consider all these things. Just sometimes one rumor can create a chaos in the society, but if they were living individually, these things were not going to work. Or people can encourage each other. Anyway, there are lots of new things that we need to learn when we study societies or history, but it doesn't mean that there is something separate as society, which has a spirit, or there is something separate as history, which has a spirit, for example, which has, decision, etc. And even if we accept there is something as society and it has a spirit, even we compromise, this does not mean that it would be able to force itself and its norms on every individual. No, there have been many individuals who always resisted against the pressure of society. They didn't swim by the current. They tried to actually reform and sometimes change the society. Reformers, prophets, etc. خب Alhamdulillah, our discussion about free will completed. Then the next discussion, my mobile also just stopped. The next discussion is about shenacht, about knowledge, theory of knowledge. We are not going to philosophical discussions about theory of knowledge, but we will explain what type of knowledge we should be equipped with in order to make good decisions. Because you need free will, you need power. If you have free will but you have no power, you cannot do anything. And you need knowledge so that you use your free will properly. I have explained these in different chapters in self-knowledge also, how we are going to use our free will. So there is a discussion about ma'rifah of our origin, our future, and our present situation. Over there, this has been explained. So inshallah, next week we study the part on shenacht, on knowledge or theory of knowledge, and inshallah we continue inshallah till we manage to complete the book. If you have any question, any comment, please put forward. Inshallah, just for your information, you of course may have the book with you, but after this discussion about shenacht, then we talk about power, and then about human inclinations and desires. Then we will inshallah finish this part, and we will start the discussion about ma'ad, about resurrection. So there is a not very detailed, there is about 70 pages on ma'ad, and then inshallah this will finish. May Allah inshallah bless you, and التماس دعاء.